I fell in love with a man that was gay, and actually a month before we were to marry, Jimmy tells me he trying to be this great Italian Lebanese man, and do things the correct way, was going to get life insurance for us, and that's how he found out he was HIV positive. And he told me, I came home from work one day and he says, "We're going to cancel the wedding." And I said, "Don't tell me that. We're a month out. That ain't happening, dude." And he told me why. And I said, "Well, I have to think about this. I just have to think about this, And I went for like 2 weeks. And I thought about it, and it really hurt my heart. Here I'd finally found somebody I loved at age 32. And, this happens. So my mom said to me, maybe before the 2 weeks was over, and she said, "Jill, what's the matter? Something's bothering you. It's bad. I know it, And I told her, I said, "Mom, Jimmy had to get this blood test, and he's HIV positive." And I was just sitting there talking with her and looking at her like, "What do I do now, Mom?" And she says, "Do you love him?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "There's no doubt in my mind." She said, "Then that kind of makes your decision up for you." And I said, "Yeah, it kind of does." So things that we did in our lives together were because of that. We did things purposely for that. Having him, his name means gift from God, because we knew we would have one shot to have a baby. And this was our gift from God. And his name, Matthew, that's what it means. So there were definitely things we did in our lives knowing, and I had the realization that the time would come when he would be gone. But worse, I guess I never thought so much about that as the splitting up, because I really did love this man. And, I think in the Bible it talks about divorce, and it's like a cleaving of the heart. Your heart just literally rips, and that is so how I felt. And it really hurt. It took me a long time to get over. I was mad as hell, as probably a lot of women are if they're in that situation, and I was. But once I started doing my homework on myself, got my act together, and got beyond that, later when he became so ill and he really needed lots of love and tenderness, I could just funnel it all right back to him. And it was pretty sweet. We could just look at each other and communicate when it was really hard for him to be able to communicate because he was very ill. And I thought, okay, And I finally admitted to my son at one point something about, well, I never really loved anybody but your dad. And Matthew's like, "Oh, I know that, But anyway, and as I told you, when he was engaged in our marriage, I never felt as loved by anybody. So
that's great. You did beautifully, and I'm going to use some of what you just said, a lot of what you just said.
Sorry for the tears.
Oh, sorry about the tears. Don't be surprised. Sorry about the tears.
The whole campaign's about humanity.
Right. Doesn't get any more human.
Yeah.
So help me with.
I want to say this too. In the process of all that we went through in our lives, we made great friends. We made friends. Other gay men, especially was men, were with us, and their wife, like myself, we would meet them, and we did a lot sometimes together with other people like that, didn't we? Sorry.
It's okay.
Anyway, in a way, it kind of enriched us, but it was really a tough thing to get over, for me.
So, help me with a statement. There came a time, and this is regarding, I guess, the split up.
Mm-hmm.
There came a time, tell me that story. There came a time when, and finish out, so that we understand that there was a separation or
Okay.
a split up.
Well, okay. I guess Matthew was about 7 at the time, and so we had only been married about 8 years, because we had him pretty quickly after we were married. And I remember we lived in a little area, and was a circular driveway or circular drive throughout the home complex where we lived. And I was walking it one night because I sensed a great depression in Jimmy. And I remember walking by myself thinking, dear Lord, if he is so depressed that he doesn't even want to live, you know. I mean, I almost sensed that depression in him, and it just broke my heart. I said, then take him, you know, from us, and so he can be happy, because he was so depressed and sad. And it was probably really, really hard for him, because he really was devoted to us and really loved us, yet he couldn't live with us, you know. And I remember walking and praying, you know, about it and thinking, geez, you know, why did I have to ask that question? You know, why did I have to go there? But I did, and it was very, very difficult to split up from him. Plus, there was no fight. There was no angry words, no malice, no bitter arguments. In fact, when our friends and our family found out we were splitting up, their reactions were total surprise. They never heard us argue. We were supportive of each other. We did everything together. So it was hard on friends. It was hard on the family, especially. But our mothers, both Jimmy's mother and my mother, accepted the fact that he was gay when they found out. And it didn't bother them at all. In fact, my mother even grew more tender. And this amazed me, that my family never spoke ill of him in front of me or in front of my son. And I know it must have hurt them desperately, because I came from a family where there were no divorces on that side. And in Jimmy's family, there were no divorces, no split-ups. And so for this to go on, you know, it must have been really tough for them. It was tough for all of us at the time. But once we got through that, and years later when we got so close, it was very sweet, very, very sweet.
Very, very sweet. And then we have a little feedback. I want you to say something like, my name is, and I married a gay man.
Okay, I can do that.
And 8 years into our relationship, tell us the timeline.
Okay.
A year later, we had a son named Matthew. Mm-hmm. 8 years later, we split up.
Jimmy's, yeah.
You know, tell the sequence of the story.
Okay.
Okay? Go ahead.
Okay. All right. My name is Jill Calise, and I, at the age of 32, fell in love, deeply in love with a man, a gay man. And I didn't know at the time he was gay, although he did tell me he was HIV positive. And so I had to make a choice, and I made the choice to marry and love him totally, and did. And we had a great life together. We had so many good and funny memories of our son, who was born a year after we were married. And
Stop.
Okay.
I want you to start with, we had a son, Matthew, who was born a year after. We need to get his name.
Okay, got it. Okay, Jimmy and I had a son, Matthew, and he was born about a year after we got married. And on our first anniversary, Jimmy was so excited because he got a balloon ride for us, and that was a blast. So it's interesting that in his life, in the 8 years we would wind up spending together, he was able to do a lot of nice things for us as a couple. And he was desperately trying to be a great dad and a great husband and a great, just a good son for his family. And it must have been really tough for him at times to have that. But he was with me about 8 years, and then he really needed to live an alternative lifestyle. He needed to be able to go out and be with other men. And he had told me that he would not be able to sleep or lay in the same bed with me and like go out or anything like that. And so we wound up splitting up. And it was rough. It was a really rough time in my life. I hope never to have anything happen to me. I mean, it was dreadful. If it hadn't been for my son at that point, I think I could have easily chosen not to live and done something, I don't know what, but.
So,
With the timeline then, after you split up, when did Jimmy become ill?
Yeah.
He needs you.
At X number of years later.
Let's see, 8. What are we looking at, you think? He was gone when you were 15, right? Probably 4 years before, when he was really sick.
Well, that's when he got Calise. He got sick about 2 and a half or 2 years before he had really sick.
Yeah. Okay.
But then
So Jimmy got really sick.
The really sick happened only 2 months beforehand. Really.
Well, yeah, but he was, remember the time?
Started to go downhill.
He did.
So say Jimmy started to go
He really started to go downhill when Matthew was probably about 11. And so much so that we'd get a call from him. He'd be at the hospital because he'd gone to the hospital, and we would know that right after we finished school, both of us, we would take our happy butts down to the hospital and see Jimmy. And then when we left there on the way home, we'd go by his apartment and collect his dog, who we loved too, and take her home with us, because there were times when he could be in there from, say, 5 days to 10 days at a hospital. And after he was gone, and we saw him in lots of situations where he was pretty ill later, especially as he came close to death. But, oh God, I forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's pursue the rest of the timeline, which was he got really sick at this point now. Or he really started to go downhill.
He did. He really started to go downhill. And
when?
He still was working and doing, he never was off. He continued to try to work, and actually that did help insurance-wise as far as, taking care of himself or being able to have money. He sometimes worked 2 jobs, believe it or not, as sick as he was. And, he had a hard time.
Sure.
Really did.
I'm looking for sort of the rest of the timeline. So he really started to go downhill when?
You said 11 he went down, started to go downhill.
Yeah, and then when Matthew...
What year? And I need to have you sort of say that.
01.
About 2001.
And he died in 05.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah. So in 2001, he really got sick. Or the AIDS really started to...
It kind of kicked in with him. His numbers, began to play more negatively than positively, and he...
So I got to stop you for a minute. I got to have you say in 2001,
okay.
And then...
Yeah, in 2001, his numbers...
Okay. In 2001, his numbers elevated, and we really began then looking at his... illness more as something that would consume him. I guess before then we had hoped that, it wouldn't, that he could stay healthy enough till they found something to work on, to work for patients that were HIV positive or were having other illnesses because of that. And so by the year, probably about a year or 2 out, so that would be like 2003, more and more time was spent in the hospital. There would be probably 5 times a year where he was in there for maybe 10 days, And we saw very cool things. One night, one of his friends who really loved him, and Jimmy, in fact, really liked him, but I think he liked him in a different way than the other gentleman liked him back. But we went up to see him, and when we got in the room, his other buddy, Jim, was laid out on the bed right next to him, just cuddling him and holding him, and it was like, oh my God, do you remember that? was very nice.
Why'd you fall in love with him in the first place? Why'd you fall in love with the family in the first place?
Yeah. When I went in the first time that I went, right after I met Jimmy, we had an interlude, so to speak, and he got sick. But this wasn't from being HIV positive at the time. It was just he got sick. He was at the hospital, and I went up to the hospital to see him. And I walk in the room, and there's his dad, this old Italian, white-haired man, sitting there, and he's stroking this man, that I liked, just stroking his head so sweetly, and I was captivated by him because kind of my own dad didn't ever show me that tenderness. And when I saw his daddy giving him that kind of love, I was just all about that. And I thought right then and there, this is a family that I want to be a part of. So
in 2005, is that when he finally...
He did finally pass away in 2005. He had the advantage of having the people that loved him very much around him. He went and lived with some friends that he'd been friends with before he met me. For probably 20 years he'd been friends with these people. And he wound up spending time in their home, and hospice came in to help, and the nurses were just awesome. And it was good. It was good. And we got his mom here from Texas, and his brother came in. And so they actually took over at the last a lot of the taking care of him. And I know some of the stuff they saw in the end was probably dreadful. And we reached a point when they started just giving Jimmy morphine because he was hurting so bad, and they didn't want him to hurt. I had told Matthew when we were over there, I said, okay, honey, this is the way this is going to play out. We know your daddy's going to die, but we know he's in a lot of pain. And they're going to begin to give him morphine. And when they do that, things are going to get all confused in his brain. And it'll, things just, he won't be able to probably communicate as easily. And, it's a drug that just does that for people. And I said, so whatever you really want to say to your daddy, go and say now. So I think he went in and saw him, and I went in and hugged him, and then we didn't go back.
So I guess my version of the story starts off really before I was even born. My dad had received the call to come to the doctor's office, and the doctor, who's actually a very good family friend of ours, had diagnosed him with HIV. The doctor, being that he's such a good family friend of ours, cared a lot for him and cares a lot for us, and said to him, Jimmy, listen, I don't know how else to tell you this, but it's time to go plan your funeral. This was 26 years ago, 27, 28, almost 30 years ago. So it was a different time period then, and it had become a different time period even over the course of my life and the end of his. My parents had me. I was lucky enough. At 8 years old, he had come out as gay. At the time, especially being so young, you kind of don't understand what homosexuality is, and gay and lesbian and transgender and bisexual, and you kind of don't really understand that. What I didn't understand is that my mom was going through a tough time, and my dad was clearly going through a tough time as well. And it wasn't something that I was able to admit to myself, even throughout high school. Once I got to college, it was a little easier to admit to other people what I was going through and what my dad was going through. But when he was alive, it was difficult for me to even admit the fact that my dad was gay. I realized as an adult, as I became an adult, how difficult of a process not only my mom had gone through, but how difficult a process he had gone through. My grandparents, my father's parents, are Italian and Lebanese. The dad's Italian. It is not well received to be gay in either of those communities or in either of those heritages. When he had announced that he was gay, my grandmother had no issue. It was her son. It was who she loved. My grandfather didn't take it so warmly. In fact, he took it so negatively that he moved out of the state and moved to Texas, where my uncle, or my dad's brother, was, where he would eventually spend the rest of his life. As I became an adult, like I said, I began to really accept it and understand who he was, and the difficulty that he had gone through in coming out as a gay man. And I realized quickly that even the things I had gone through and losing him and the current struggles I go through, that I'm not sure that those struggles match what he and my mom had really gone through and endured. When I was 11 or so, I'd already known that my dad had HIV/AIDS, but when I was 11, we had finally realized that he had a Kaposi's sarcoma, similar to the cancer that Tom Hanks in Philadelphia made famous. He would get sick and gradually get more sick, and throughout high school and middle school, we'd notice how sick he'd get, and we'd go to the hospital and frequent the hospital and spend time. And he'd always said that his dream was to see me graduate high school. And around the age of 14 or 15, we had realized that maybe that would not come true, that would not come to fruition. In fact, so much so that we had taken a trip just 2 months before he died. We'd taken a trip to New York City and Providence, where my family is. My cousin, who is this large Italian man, 6'5", 300 pounds, as he took us to the airport that day to go home, he looked at Dad and said, "Jimmy, was this you saying goodbye?" And that was something I didn't know for years later, but I don't think there was any doubt that was his moment. We came home and he recovered a little bit, and then came home with pneumonia. So he had gone to the hospital again, and we realized that it was time. Once they had done that, they'd done some testing and realized that although he had shown some physical signs of Kaposi's sarcoma, that from the inside out he was dying quickly. He he tried to be funny as he was and make the situation as light as it was, and I'm the same way. So of course we all did, and I was going to school and still trying to make it happen, and my mom was at work at the time, so we were trying to really keep life as normal as possible going through all of it. We were lucky that we had some friends and family that supported us as deeply as they did, and our friends Keith and Phyllis, his dear friends that he had known for 30 years, 20 years, somewhere around that, brought him into their home and adapted their home so that he could be there and have his friends and family around him. The hardest thing for me was we had stayed a couple of nights over there, and one of the nights I'll always remember was staying on the couch, and you could hear him breathe, and then he would stop, and then he would breathe, and then he would stop, and he'd pray that he would finally pass, but he didn't, and he lived on. And he lived for weeks later and spent time. The hardest moment, he was showering one day and needed help. He couldn't really move his body or shower clean. Sorry, so...
Take a few deep breaths, you don't have to.
So I helped him, and I took it my responsibility to help him. And I'm showering, I'm cleaning him, and wiping him down, and he was so worried about this, but I don't know how I could be, because if you ever met him, you couldn't. It's impossible. He had said, "Son, never forget me, but don't remember me. Don't remember me like you see me now." And that was tough. it was tough to be 15 and kind of going through that. Years later, I when I was 19 or so, I decided my first tattoo was going to be for my dad, because he and I had this love-hate relationship with tattoos, and I love tattoos, and he hated them for some reason. He had one, but he never wanted me to have one. So I got one, and it was for him, and it's wings on my back with his initials. And I'll always say this, that although like losing my dad was tough and going through it, I'm extremely blessed for the family I have, and for having the 15 years I had with him, because there's a lot of people that don't have that opportunity at all to spend any time with their dads, even know one. So I was very blessed. Very blessed.
Hi, I'm Jill Calise,
And I'm Matthew Calise.
and we are Straight Allies.